Episode 6, called Smallfolk, begins with an expected change to the opening credits. We're going to do a full breakdown of the intro after the season, pointing out all the changes and what they mean, but for now it's worth pointing out that Rook's Rest has been added and the red blood trail has turned black, the color of dragon blood. Aemond's recent stoicism is replaced by rage, and as his mother tells him, he's becoming arrogant. He doesn't listen to his counselors and appears to view disagreement as disloyalty, leading the Greens with a green dragon and red flags. And red banners. The Lannisters arrive at the Golden Tooth with 8,000 men and lions in cages? Yep. And we hear a variation on the Reigns of Castamere. The actual Reigns of Castamere are probably present as well, since Tywin hasn't been yet born to wipe them out. Aemond is glad to have them all as allies, but mad when they ask him for an escort. His plan is to hit Harrenhal from the east and west simultaneously and take on Daemon personally. Meanwhile, we know the Northern Army is on the march and has been granted passage at the Twins as they head towards Riverrun, which the Western Army will have to pass if they want to get to Harrenhal. So a showdown between the Lannister host and the hosts of the Riverlands in the north could be imminent. But the Riverlands is still in disarray. Elsewhere, Orwell mentions that the Hightower armies have been delayed thanks to their own bannermen attacking them. House Beesbury, who are Hightower vassals, blame the Greens for the death of Lord Lyman, the old master of coin Criston Cole killed back in episode 9. Fair point, Beesbury's. Aemond's calm demeanor returns in time for him to fire his mother and recall his grandfather Otto, because as he says, every king needs a hand. But Aemond is not the king, and no one actually seems to know where Otto is. Hearing that Aegon is awake and improving, Aemond goes to visit him, aggressively. He interrogates him about Rook's Rest, mostly to see if he remembers Vhagar nearly incinerating him. Aegon painfully claims he doesn't recall, but that is almost certainly a lie to save his badly burned skin, as Larys himself will suggest later. In episode 5, Aemond claimed Aegon's council orb when he became regent, but he gives the orb back to Aegon here while keeping the sword Blackfire, a sign that he's ruling in his own name, his own way. Didn't take long. Larys attempts to get in good with Aemond, but is rudely shut down. He just doesn't like strongs. The king, however, sleeps 9 hours out of 10, is in horrible pain, fears for his life, and is heavily drugged up. The perfect opportunity for Larys to sink his hooks in deep. Larys tells Aegon how the world will view him now that he's disabled. It's a heart-rending scene with brilliant acting. Larys tells the king that people will underestimate him, like we saw Aemond do moments before when reducing Larys to a messenger. It's easy to be fooled in this moment, like Aegon probably was, but make no mistake, while Larys' life experience is 100% real, he's got a bigger goal here, which is to break Aegon down emotionally as someone who understands in a way no one else can, someone he can trust, not just an advisor, a friend. Larys is probably right that Aegon needs him, because his brother might want him dead. But Larys has no place in Aemond's regime either, so he might need the king just as much as the king needs him. Never forget this line from Renly when he was trying to convince Ned to take Joffrey away from Cersei in the wake of Robert's death. He said, "Protector or no, the man who holds the king holds the kingdom." Alicent speaks with her brother while frequently shooting looks at Sir Criston, who looks back at her. Gwaine notices, but is too downcast to care. There's no sign of his former humor. Now that this war has been given to the dragons, he feels powerless even at the head of an army, resigned to whatever his fate may be. Now she feels powerless now too. It's strange to see two people of such high birth and station with such little agency. Sir Criston doesn't seem to feel much better about any of this either. Gwaine and Alicent talk about her now 16-year-old son Daeron, Dragonrider, stalwart, kind, and good with the loot. They talk of how duty ruled their lives even as children. Gwaine says their father Otto favored her, which is why she came to court and he stayed in Old Town, but he doesn't blame her for it, and doesn't think the Red Keep is a good place to raise kids, or to be one. Helena would probably agree. Child rearing at the Red Keep has gone poorly for her, though it's the only home she's ever known, and she wonders why one of her crickets has stopped singing. So do we. A riot breaks out while the Green Queens are lighting candles to the seven above for Aegon's health. The Smallfolk throw fish while praising Rhaenyra as the tension grows, but the inexperience of Aegon's drinking's guard makes it worse. This is a callback to the bread ride in Season 2 of Game of Thrones, based on the same scene in The Clash of Kings. Joffrey orders the Hound to attack people who threw dung at him, leading an angry crowd to turn violent, and one of the Kingsguard is killed. There's a long theory that Varys either knew the riot was likely or even encouraged it. Here in House of the Dragon, we know for sure that another Master of Whisperers who claims to come from extremely humble origins encouraged this riot. Lady Mysaria. First, she spread rumors that the Red Keep was throwing lavish feasts and dances to celebrate Prince Aemond's ascent. Two women wronged by the Greens are at the forefront of this propaganda. Sylvie, the madame whom Aemond used to visit frequently, speaks loudly to Diana, who was raped by Aegon. This comes with vivid food descriptions worthy of George R. R. Martin himself. Ulf and other patrons hear the two talking and shake their heads, pointing out that Viserys loved to feast and drink, but he never did so while the city starved. Viserys knew how to keep the peace, and isn't it a shame that the heir he chose to continue that peace was denied her seat? Just saying. Now, party vibe is the exact opposite of what Aemond is bringing to the table, but the lie works because, I guess, it sounds so tasty. We later see Ulf outdoors before the riot, complaining about the sheep being led past for the dragons, but it's Hugh who punches another man to take his food. Sending shipments of food to King's Landing was the second part of Mysaria's plan. The blame went to the Greens, the acclaim to the Blacks, and the annoyance to Aemond. Mysaria's esteem in the eyes of Queen Rhaenyra has risen significantly. Not only has she proved a useful advisor, but she's been providing emotional support. And in this episode, it progresses. Not just an advisor, a lover. Rhaenyra is lonely, estranged from her husband and others, and is worried she can't win the war. It's a lot different than being laid up in bed with broken bones and painkillers, but it leaves her vulnerable all the same. Mysaria tells her origin story to Rhaenyra, complete with paternal abuse and a rise from nothing. It's impressive and wins her sympathy. It's probably true, too, or mostly true, and she seems to genuinely believe in Rhaenyra as a queen. When Rhaenyra tests out the feel of a sword in her hand, though, the white worm tells her that the blade, quote, becomes her. This is symbolic of Rhaenyra turning more to fear and violence as tools, and Mysaria enables this, encourages this. Rhaenyra barely needs encouragement, however. Her son, her husband, the men of her council have done things behind her back, talked down to her, and in general showed various forms of disrespect. This comes to a head a bit when she slaps Lord Celtigar and tells him it's her fault that he doesn't fear her, which means she intends to be more intimidating, and that will require action more than words. A slap could seem like nothing in comparison later. The queen has decided she needs to inspire fear, and the queen we keep catching her reading about is Visenya, who absolutely inspired fear. Visenya had Vhagar, something Rhaenyra does not, but she does have the white worm, whom Visenya did not. And Mysaria encourages Rhaenyra to try again after failing in her first attempt to find new dragonriders. Because it's not that she lacks for dragons big enough to take on Vhagar, she lacks for riders. Rhaenyra understandably isn't eager to repeat anything like what she saw when the Lord Commander of her Queen's Guard attempted to mount Sea Smoke, only to be burned to death. It was an amazing scene featuring the return of the song With Three Heads, which Daemon sang to Vermithor last season. The failure hits Rhaenyra hard. Sir Steffon Darklyn had been perhaps her most trusted knight, and this trust, and his grandmother's grandmother being Targaryen, is why he was picked first. Now, in order to find dragonriders, she'll have to widen her search, which means people she might not know, let alone trust, as she does one of her Queen's Guard. This is a good example of one of the major themes of the episode, the burden of authority, where rulers have to make difficult choices that sometimes get people killed. So Larys is not the only master of whisperers getting personal with their sovereign, but there's another character manipulating a person of royal power while being useful, the enigmatic Alys Rivers. Daemon has gotten worse as the lack of sleep piles up, but this series of waking dreams culminates in what so many of us were clamoring for. Paddy! It's great to see King Viserys again. Daemon relives the moment where his brother exiled him from court in House of the Dragon's very first episode. He knows what his brother is about to say, but the memory is so painful for him that he says, "Don't," just before Viserys delivers the sentence. After so many dreams of his family, this one finally breaks him. He loved his brother and has regrets over his own disloyalty. He tries to leave the throne room, but cannot, and panics, demanding, begging that the door be opened. Now, we can't hear anyone yelling about opening or closing doors and not think of Hodor, who had Bran in his head, and Daemon thinks someone is inside his head, and he's probably right. The powers Bran had command of are older than living memory, as Alys Rivers says, and she hints that those powers are in play here, in a game where he is but a piece on the board, and so is she. With Caraxes singing in the background, the heart tree even nearer, and defeated by his dreams, Daemon finally sets his pride and anger aside and asks for counsel, and then help. Notice that she closes her eyes when he does this, and soon after, an owl lands on her arm. Since she has already referred to herself as a barn owl, the skin changer vibes are really off the charts here. Alicent tells him to do nothing and wait 3 days. Unlike Alicent telling Aegon to do nothing, it seems Daemon takes her advice. The next we see, he's back in the dream with Viserys, but it's a very different vibe. He comforts his brother and tells him he should have been there for him. It's a turning point. He's not fighting his ghosts anymore. He's accepting them, maybe even joining them. For the first time, he owns his guilt rather than denying it. While this change is taking place within him, change is taking place in the Riverlands. Sir Simon informs him that Alice Rivers herself tried to heal Lord Grover Tully, but failed, and he passed. He has just the barest of smirks when he says this, I think. This means that young Lord Oscar is now in charge, and according to Alice, if he raises his banners, it will actually unite the Riverlands. Daemon is pleased at the news, but hearing that an old sick man was helped to his death reminds him of the brother he was just dreaming of, the brother who he failed, and he weeps. Was this the final stage in his dream arc, or will he still feel the effects of the so-called curse? Over at the Vale, Rhaenyra gives her stepbrother Prince Joffrey a speech about doing their part, even if it seems small and unimportant, only to stumble on a huge patch of scorched earth and burned sheep. Holding a dragon figurine while sitting in a classic princess pose near her half-brothers Aegon and Viserys, and Aegon's hatchling Stormcloud, Rhaenyra inquires about this dragon. Lady Jane says it's large, formidable, and wild. She also says Prince Reggio of Pentos is ready to accept them upon the merchant cog Gay Abandon. But Rhaenyra is not eager to embark. Over on Driftmark, Alan is promoted to first mate on Corlys's flagship, but like his niece Rhaenyra, he's not eager to embark either. Like another famous bastard, he doesn't want it, but it's an order. He expects to be fighting Lannisters and or Greyjoys eventually, and that may be true, but it's their old enemies, the Triarchy, that might be coming sooner if Aemond has his way, and if Sir Tyland, whom Aemond sends, can win them over. This could backfire as the Triarchy are not trustworthy, but this was one of several warnings from his council and family that Aemond ignored. The Sea Snake is first seen standing alone at the painted table, representing how he feels. He puts on the Hand of the Queen pin because he's ready to carry on the mission his wife died for, and though he's lost his son and daughter as well, he has grandchildren and 2 bastard sons. Alan wants to keep his distance, though. Not only does he not want his father's attention, he doesn't even want his hair. And maybe that will never change. But Adam does want his father's attention. Alan tells Adam not to hold out hope waiting for something that will never come, but he didn't consider Sea Smoke choosing his brother. I think maybe riding your half-brother's dragon is a sufficient attention grabber. Dad might notice you now, Adam. It certainly got Rhaenyra to fly off on Syrax to learn who this new rider is. She may soon discover it's her ex-husband's bastard brother who she didn't even know existed. But as she takes flight, the episode ends. And so does our breakdown. Make sure to catch History of Westeros' full podcast episode where everything here and much more is discussed in greater detail. And check out our preview episodes filled with predictions and guesses and theories, but never leaks. Valar read us.